Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, no matter where you're at. We're happy you're here to join us for Cosmetics GMP. Be prepared for US MoCRA. Today, we'll talk about just provide a quick overview of MoCRA, the current US FDA cosmetic requirements, defining the GMP and cosmetic supply chain, compliance versus certification. We'll talk about ISO 22716, a good outline. Top nonconformities identified by SGS audits. We'll go over SGS training opportunities, and certainly, while we'll have a Q&A session, if you do have a question along the way, I hope you feel free to go ahead and type it in. We'd love to answer all of your questions. Today's speakers include John Gollett. He's our technical manager and senior auditor at SGS North America, and he has over 34 years working with quality and project management experience. He has a lot of time of leadership experience in pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, personal care, food, and the medical device industry. His specialties include quality assurance, QC, supplier qualification management, and others. I'm John Armstrong. I'm the national sales manager for pharmaceuticals. I did work in cosmetic and personal care for a year here this last year. And so my experience includes about 20 years in healthcare operations and senior leadership roles, commercial operations, sales, training, with an emphasis on pharma, medical devices, OTC, and skincare. Anyway, we'd love the opportunity to help any way we can today. I think in brief, a lot of people ask, why SGS? SGS has been around a long time. It started off in 1878, and by the mid-century, 20th century, in the 1900s, the company did diversify into inspection, testing, and verification services. The company is public. It's listed on Swiss Stock Exchange, and today has more than 140 years in business. So we are the largest company. We're number one. We're just shy of 100,000 employees out of the 200 some countries around the world. We've got offices in 2,600. We're probably in about 140 countries. We operate in 11 global industries. So we have a lot of experience. We are very large, but we also have a lot of experience right here in the United States and around the world in cosmetics and skincare. And so in addition to certification, we do a lot of things, right? So we can go into a company and do a third-party audit. We could do a pre-audit assessment. We could do a gap analysis. We could qualify a new vendor for you. We could take a look, do a surveillance audit to see where an audit or supplier is for you. We can also do an at-cause audit if there were a letter of some type from the FDA or whomever. We do supply chain assurance, so we can go out and track down suppliers all over the world. We're a global company, and so we operate locally, but we can use our global partners as well to help you out with your supply chain assurance. We offer consulting services. A lot of companies will come to us if they get a letter of warning and they want a deep dive to see how they might prepare their capital plan, or for a lot of reasons. And if you find yourself in that situation, we would love the opportunity to help. We offer training. The in-person training could be in your office. It could be a hybrid in your office, and then other people around the world could join remotely online. We do sustainability insurance as well, ESG. We do social responsibility. We can help out. And we also are a notified body for medical devices, and so we can help you with regulatory compliance as well. But anyway, again, we're global. Not only do we offer quality assurance, we live by that as well. We have deep industry expertise and certainly differentiate ourselves on digital innovation and corporate sustainability. So some of what we do: agriculture, manufacturing, energy, chemicals, construction, transportation, life sciences, forest, pharma, cosmetics. I think a lot of times we run into companies that do a little of pharma and chemicals and cosmetics or skincare. Or sometimes when we're doing food, we run into dietary supplements or OTC, finished pharmaceutical goods. So anyway, we cover a lot. And John certainly has deep experience in several of the industries that I already mentioned. So over 50 years of quality audit experience, working in all major industries, partnerships around the world, technical experts. We've conducted over 1 million audits, and certainly with expert product managers who are highly involved. So anyway, with all that said, I'd like to introduce you to John. And John, go ahead and take it away, please.
All right, thank you very much, John. So welcome. My name again is John Golick. I'm the Technical Manager and Senior Auditor here at SGS. And today, the two big topics that I want to cover is just a quick review of what MoCRA is, what MoCRA isn't, what's taken effect, what's still coming, and then I want to go through a list of a list of nonconformities that our auditors globally have seen in cosmetic GMP certification audits for 22716. So starting off, just to remind people that MoCRA is a modernization of the Cosmetic Regulation Act. Consumers use cosmetics every day, and of course everyone knows that there are many different types of cosmetic products out there and personal care products out on the market. So again, everybody remembers December 2022, MoCRA was signed into law, a significant expansion of the FDA's authority, helping to ensure safety of the cosmetic products. Everybody remembers that the voluntary cosmetic registration program was stopped in March of 2023, and as everybody knows, that data was not transferred and a new system was created. So just to remind folks, cosmetic products is a preparation of cosmetic ingredients with a qualitative and quantitative set composition for use in a finished product, and that the responsible person under the MoCRA Act is the manufacturer, packer, or distributor of a cosmetic product whose name appears on the label of the cosmetic product being sold to the consumer. So a facility is any establishment, including an establishment of an importer, that manufactures or processes cosmetic products distributed in the United States. There have been areas carved out for certain beauty shops, salons, certain retailers, hospital, public health agencies, trade shows. Certain research and testing facilities are excluded, and establishments that solely perform one or more of the following with respect to cosmetic products are considered an establishment. So if you're doing labeling, relabeling, packaging, repackaging, holding, or distributing, then you are part of a cosmetic manufacturing establishment. So as everybody's aware, cosmetics now have to follow the adverse event requirements. So an adverse event is any health-related event associated with the use of a cosmetic product. So a serious adverse event could result in death or a life-threatening experience, inpatient hospitalization, persistent or significant disability or incapacity, a congenital anomaly or birth defect, an infection or significant disfigurement, including serious and persistent rashes, second or third degree burns, significant hair loss, or persistent or significant alteration of appearance other than as attended under the conditions of use that are customary or usual, or requires, based on reasonable medical judgment, a medical or surgical intervention to prevent an outcome described in A. So that is the definition of a serious adverse event that we all have to follow. So some of the major provisions of the MoCRA was the records inspections requirements. So MoCRA amended the FD&C Act to provide FDA inspections of facilities that manufacture or process cosmetics shall extend to certain records and information such as adverse event report, as well as applicable standards for records of inspections apply. And also record access. The FDA has a reasonable belief that a cosmetic product, including an ingredient in such product, is likely to be adulterated such that the use or exposure to the product presents a threat of serious adverse health consequences or death to humans. The FDA can access and copy certain records related to the cosmetic product, including safety records. So it actually granted the FDA more authority. So one of the things that occurred and took effect at the end of last year was that you're required now to have safety substantiation documentation available for the FDA to review when they come visit your facility. So a responsible person is required to ensure and maintain records supporting the adequate substantiation of safety of their product. And that is now in effect, so if the FDA does show up, which they have hired their auditors and they're training their auditors, and there is a potential for them to show up, they have the right to ask for those safety substantiation records. The mandatory serious adverse event reporting is in effect, went into effect last year. So a responsible person is required to report serious adverse events associated with the use of cosmetic products in the United States to the FDA within 15 business days after receiving such a report. The responsible person must also provide certain additional information, such as new medical information received within 1 year of the initial report. The FDA will also have access to adverse events reports during inspections. So that's something that has taken effect, and that is something that the auditors, when they come out to do certification audits, will be looking at is your serious adverse event reporting system and your records around it. We're all aware that we're down into the last 30 days of having to have our registration and product listings submitted to the agency. So July 1st is the date, and we are all now required to, as cosmetic manufacturers and processors, to register their facilities, and that for the responsible parties, they have to register their products with the FDA. So the FDA has the right, if they feel that your product or your site could produce an adverse event or a serious health consequence, to actually revoke your registration and product listings. And it is prohibited to distribute or sell in the United States cosmetic products from a facility with a suspended registration. And when you're working with the FDA and your product listings, you have to provide updates to the FDA on your product listings. As new products come on, as products fall off, and then annually you got to provide updates as well. The FDA now also has mandatory recall authority over the cosmetic industry. So the FDA can now force you to do a recall versus a voluntary recall. And labelings for professional use is a requirement. So certain cosmetics that are intended to be used only by licensed professionals have certain requirements in their labeling. And also contact information requirements for labeling, including domestic address, phone number, or electronic contact information, which may include a website. And those requirements were issued out at the end of last year for what those labeling requirements are, and those labeling requirements are now in effect, and you need to make sure that you're following those labeling requirements. There are some labeling for fragrance allergen rules that are being worked on and will be issued by the FDA. And as we're all aware, last summer the FDA hosted a listening session about GMPs because the law says that they have to bring their GMPs up to the international standard. Currently, the accepted international standard is ISO 22716 for GMPs for cosmetics. And the FDA did listen and publish the transcripts and all the information. There was a feedback period about those GMPs, and by the end of this year, the FDA is going to issue the updated draft guidance on what the new GMPs are going to be, and then at the end of 2025, they become effective. And of course, there's going to be a test method for detecting asbestos in talc-containing compounds that has to be issued as part of the MoCRA law as well. And the PFAS in cosmetics There's a report that is, I don't remember if it was issued yet or going to be issued still, around PFAS in cosmetics. So if we look at the key provisions that the FDA originally set out to when things were going to occur, adverse event reporting is already in effect. Good manufacturing practices will roll into effect during 2025. Registration and product listings have to be in by July 1st. Safety substantiation is in effect. The draft guidance on fragrance labeling of fragrance allergies will come in later this year and take effect in 2025. The labeling contact information doesn't take effect till 2025 according to law, but the FDA has already issued some guidance, draft guidance or guidance documents on that. Labeling for professional use has taken effect. The mandatory recall has taken effect. The asbestos test method for asbestos and talc, that has to be in place by the end of 2025, and the PFAS report has to be issued by the end of 2025. So, as we went through this a little bit on the last slide, adverse events, safety substantiation, serious event reporting, those site registrations and product listings, and the recall authority are all implemented. So is the labeling for professional use and the contact information has been implemented. Fragrance rule, GMP's draft end of this year, and test methods for talc. The guidance should be coming out shortly, and the PFAS will be the end of 2024 for the final rule. The latest updates. So with that said, how many of you know if your sites have registered already with the FDA? So I'll give you a couple seconds here to answer this question, because it's actually live polling. There we go. Now I'm starting to see some people selecting an answer. Over 50% have responded so far. Give just a few more seconds for you guys to respond. About 2/3 of you responded so far, so let's see what the answer looks like. And so far, with 2/3 response, we have 68% said yes, they've completed the activity, 20% said not yet. Remind you, after the 1st of July, and 12% weren't sure at this point. All right. How many of you have checked to make sure that your labeling is up to date to the new requirements that the FDA issued the guidance documents out for? So I'll give you some time to answer this question as well. About 25%, 33% responded now. A little over 50% responded. Hoping to get to that magic 2/3 number so then they can get a good sampling of people in attendance today. we're about 60% responded, so we'll go ahead and show you the results. So about 60% of the folks that have responded so far said yes, they've made sure they're labeling up to date. 12% said no, and 30% are not sure. If you're in the no or not sure category, you want to make sure that you double check to make sure your labeling is correct. All right. A little bit of background here. The FDA's Cosmetic Good Manufacturing Guidelines and Inspection Checklist was based on documented information dated before the 1990s, was therefore out of date. In the 2000s, the International Corporation of Cosmetic Regulations met in Brussels, and their goal was to synchronize international regulations, including the US FDA, the Ministry of Health, Labor, Welfare of Japan, the European Commission, Directorate General Enterprise, and Health Canada. And they talked about GMPs, and there was a recognition that everybody should work for a common approach toward the use of ISO 22716. So the FDA updated their draft guidance document in 2008 and then again in June of 2013, and they adopted sections and parts of ISO 22716 in their guidance document for the U.S. GMP standards. And the GMPs focused with the FDA on starting materials, premises, equipment, training personnel, hygiene of staff, and on banned substances. They wanted to prevent adulteration and make sure they were trying to maintain product quality and safety. Were there some gaps that they left versus the international, what the rest of the international community was doing with ISO 22716? Yes, absolutely. That's also part of the reason why MoCRA was passed, was to get the FDA to update and close some of those gaps with the rest of the world. So the FDA said the purpose of having GMP was to prevent the delivery of cosmetic products that were adulterated or misbranded. And according to ISO, GMP constitutes the practical development of quality assurance through the description of plant activities, enabling the manufacturer to achieve product that meets all defined characteristics with consideration to risk. And the 22716 cosmetic guidelines are not legally enforceable, and that's why you don't see shalls in the document, you see shoulds. The FDA guidance currently presents the FDA thinking on the various issues that could adversely affect cosmetic product safety and performance. And what we're waiting to see in the future, at the end of this year, is what the FDA is going to adopt going forward for GMPs. So one of the big things that the agency has been talking about is the cosmetic supply chain and ensuring that GMPs are applied across the cosmetic supply chain so that we use risk management to create good quality products to provide safety for the consumers. With that said, we're looking at ISO 22716 in the second half of this presentation here. We're going to talk about 22716 and the common nonconformities that we're seeing around the globe. But we have to remember that currently 22716 is a compliance document, is a certification process, and it's a ISO document. You have to comply to the FDA requirements for GMPs for cosmetics in the United States. If you want to ship your cosmetics outside of the United States, then you have to comply to that country's requirements, which most of those countries have adopted 22716 requirements. So compliance is a legal term that you have to meet the regulatory compliance, versus certification is a voluntary adherence to a standard. So before we get into ISO 22716, I just want to see what you guys know about 22716. So the first question right out of the gate for you is, do the ISO 22716 GMPs cover everything? So I'll give you a little bit here to go ahead and answer this question, yes, no, or unsure. All right, we're about 25% reported. And yes, thank you for throwing questions in the Q&A. We will get to those at the end of the presentation. All right, 50% reported. Okay, we're about 60%, so we'll go ahead and show you the results. And 10%, 11% said yes, 58% no, and 31% were unsure. And the good answer is the majority of you got the question correct, 58%. The answer is no. ISO 22716 GMPs do not cover everything. They do not cover the safety aspects for manufacturing personnel. They do not cover all aspects of protection of the environment, and they do not cover the distribution of products. They cover the shipment, but not the distribution of products. So a little bit of background on ISO 22716. It's the international cosmetic standard. The guideline covers quality aspects of products, but as a whole does not cover its safety aspects, personnel engaged, and they do not cover aspects of protection of the environment. Safety environment aspects are inherent responsibilities of the company and could be covered by local legislation and other regulations. And also there are other ISO certifications like ISO 14001 and ISO 45001 that cover the environmental health and safety aspects. And the guidelines are not applicable to research and development activities and the distribution of finished products. So that's straight out of the introduction section of ISO 22716. For those of you who are not aware, or those of you who haven't looked at it in a while, ISO 22716 is broken down into 17 sections, with 1 being the scope, 2 being the terms and conditions, and then 3 through 17 being the clauses that a company is audited against for their certification practice. And there is a section called waste management, or waste, that in 2007 the folks that wrote this did not see enough companies implementing health and environmental requirements in their systems, so they wanted to include waste management. So there is a few clauses around handling waste included in the standard. So what we're going to get into here as we go through these slides here is, as we go through these different sections on premises, we're going to attack premises and personnel to start with. So when you look at personnel, some of the common nonconformities that we're finding across the world is a lack of GMP training for temporary personnel. The regulatory agencies really doesn't care if the employee is a full-time employee or a contract employee or a temporary employee. They expect the temporary employees to receive the same GMP training as full-time employees. We see a problem, have a nonconformity around lack of having trained personnel, lack of training documentation for GMP and personal hygiene requirements, a lack of a defined quality organization, lack of management of the quality management system. So in the old days, ISO had the management rep, and everybody in management threw all the responsibilities on the management rep. Under the new versions of ISO, the management team is responsible for owning the quality management system and not a management rep. So when we go into premises, and you look at premises, some of the findings that we find around premises are the facilities not being in a good state of repair. Went into one facility, and they had a hole in the ground in their warehouse at the entrance to their raw material testing lab off the warehouse, and the hole in the floor had been there for 17 years. And it was not only a safety issue, but also a GMP issue, because you can't keep the floors clean when you have a hole in the floor that collects dirt and dust. Lack of a cleaning program and a lack of cleaning records, including overhead areas in warehouses and packaging areas and production areas. Lack of preventative maintenance programs. Pest control program issues, with doors not being bracketed, no bug lights to control flyers, no rodent runs around the interior of the exterior walls, so that if a rodent comes in on a pallet, then if it runs off the pallet, it can run to a wall and run along the wall until it hits the next mouse trap to collect the mouse for you. Door apps. And then one of the things that's in premises and also is in equipment is there's a requirement around consumables, and not having a well-established consumables program. Consumables could be around cleaning agents, single-use parts, and also preventative maintenance materials that the maintenance shop might use as part of the preventative maintenance program. When we jump into Clause 5, which is equipment, you'll see that into the equipment, you'll see a lot of similar type findings as in the premises. But to start with is we find issues with the calibration programs, not requiring product impact assessments for when equipment is calibrated. You have the as found and as left. When the as found is out of tolerance or the equipment is broken, the system doesn't require a product impact assessment. We see a lack of cleaning program and records, or inadequate cleaning and program and records. One place went to, the procedure said, clean the floors, walls, and ceilings. Yet common sense says you should start at the top of the room and work down. They train their employees to start at the top of the room and work down, but the procedure was backwards. And when we audited the room, we looked in the room that said it was clean, and on the corners of the floor was labels and things that were knocked off the machine when they cleaned the equipment as they came down through the room. But they cleaned the floor first, they cleaned the walls second, cleaned the ceiling third, then they cleaned the equipment, and then they never went back and cleaned the floors again with what came down from above. Lack of preventative maintenance programs again, the consumables not being well established. Scale usage not being appropriate for the scale. So the batch record telling them to weigh out to 2 decimal places, but the scale only goes to 1 decimal place. Equipment's installed, maintained, or used in a way that does not prevent cross-contamination, or equipment that's not suitable for use. My favorite equipment not being suitable for use, the company was using a canoe paddle they'd bought at Kmart to mix their products, including the fact that the varnish was flaking off the paddle. Not probably the most suitable piece of equipment. When it comes to raw materials and packaging materials, we find a lot of times where labeling is not controlled. Labeling is just received, stored in the warehouse, and anybody in the company can go out and grab labeling at any given time that they needed it. Reevaluation of raw materials is not being controlled by a procedure. It's not being captured. It's actually a specific requirement in ISO 22716 that the reevaluation of raw materials has to have a process in place. A lack of a vendor qualification program, a permit being out of date, no change control issued when changing suppliers, no raw material or packaging specifications in place, and no testing of the water that's being used in the product. When we move into production, or Clause 7, some of the nonconformities that we see is no master batch records in place, and batch records not capturing critical steps, no check-by function on critical steps, no line clearances being done, no label reconciliation, and no process to handle returned materials going back to stock in the warehouse. So when you finish weighing, when you're doing your pre-weigh activities and you have material left over, or in the packaging line that you have materials left over and you send them back to the warehouse, there's no process in place for doing that and accounting for that material. On the finished product clauses, the things that we're seeing are warehouse temperatures not being monitored or monitored incorrectly when required by the product label, inappropriate use of the terms cool and dry place, because when you look at cool and dry place, cool actually means 8 degrees C to 15 degrees C, and dry is the less than 40% humidity at 20 degrees C, or the equivalent of 40% humidity at the temperature you're at. Actually having no release process in place. Release is being done by somebody other than the quality group. No process for handling product returns. No process to control rejected products. And believe it or not, no shipping records on file. When we jump to Clause 9, which is Quality Control Laboratory, ISO 22716 is the unique standard in the fact that it actually has a requirement that when you have purchased reagents or medias, that you're required to put the date opened on the container. And that is continually a nonconformity that we see around the globe, where laboratories are not putting the date opened on their laboratory reagents and laboratory medias. We continually see expired reagents in laboratories. We have sampling processes that are not adequately documented, and inadequate training around sampling processes. Retentions of finished products are not adequate. Either there's not enough product being retained, it's not being retained long enough, not being stored in a proper environment. And out-of-specification procedures are inadequate or not being followed. In the United States, the FDA has only ever issued one OOS-OOT, out-of-spec, out-of-trend guidance document, and that was on the pharma side. But the agency has implied over the years that every other type of manufacturer should follow the intent of that document. And if you understand the intent of that document and your OOS system is set up to follow having a stage 1 investigation where you're determining whether it's a lab error or not, and then a stage 2 investigation where you determine if you're going to resample, retest, and also start a manufacturing investigation, and you document those decisions appropriately, then you're on the right track. Clause 10, out-of-specification product. We have out-of-trends not being investigated, where the FDA actually expects you to investigate out-of-trends. out of specifications not being investigated, and OS investigations that are inadequate, either around the fact that they didn't do a thorough stage 1 laboratory investigation, or they decided to retest or resample without proper justification. And again, this is that wonderful waste section that talks about types and flows, containers and disposals. We see issues in plants where the trash cans do not have any lids, trash cans overflowing, no records for destruction of product, waste not being handled appropriately as far as waste from the laboratory is walked through the general production area on its way out to the satellite storage facility, or satellite storage facility overflowing, or flammable cabinets not being kept closed, along those lines. And the flow of waste is not adequate as far as the flow of waste could potentially cause a contamination or a cross-contamination issue. When we look at subcontracting, because the standard actually has a section that talks about this is what the contract giver should do, this is what the contract receiver needs to do, and there should be written contracts. By the definition of written contracts, that could be a formal contract or as simple as terms and conditions of a purchase order being accepted. So the things that we see are no written contracts in place, and a lot of companies don't even have a subcontracting process in place. So when we look at deviations in ISO 22716, it could be a deviation. A deviation is the same thing as a nonconformity. The biggest things we're seeing is inadequate investigations, deviations not being issued when they should have been, and effectiveness checks not being performed. Under complaints and recalls, under Clause 14, we're actually seeing people that do not have a recall process. Under the complaints requirements, all complaints have to be logged, and decisions need to be made as to whether you're going to investigate or not. And we're seeing complaints that are not being recorded. Quality is not ensuring that complaint investigations are completed. When complaint investigations are done, companies aren't looking to see if other lots or products might be affected. And of course, the standard also says on the recall side that you need to challenge your recall system periodically. We're not seeing mock recalls being performed. In Clause 15 for change control, we actually find companies that have no management of change processes. We see companies that don't have a risk-based change control system. And we see companies where quality is not the final approver of change controls. With Clause 16 on internal audits, we're seeing that companies didn't complete their internal audit for the last year. The standard says you'll do yearly audits. No trained internal auditors. No internal auditor qualification or training program. Nonconformities found during the internal audit not being closed in a timely manner. And no evidence that you're in compliance to your internal audit program. And finally, on Clause 17, which is documentation, we're still seeing handwritten notes posted in production areas or in batch records. We see inadequate document control systems to where the people do not have access to procedures because they're electronically, and there's no electronic access on the shop floor, or the old paper system is not being updated appropriately. Quality not being the final approver of the document change control process. We're seeing inadequate document retention timeframes and inadequate document storage areas to ensure the records are well maintained, and we constantly see good documentation issues, either no procedures, no training, or just in general good documentation practice issues. So that, in a nutshell, is the nonconformities that we commonly see globally around the world when SGS goes out and does ISO 22716 certification audits. Let's see, I jumped too many slides, sorry. Let's go back a slide. I'm going to hand this back over to John and let him take over with slide number 48.
Well, thank you, John. So we do offer a whole lot of types of professional training courses to help out with your audit team training. The most popular is ISO 22716 in terms of internal auditor 2-day course. So what that really entails is going over the standard for 1 day and then really role-playing against common nonconformities or situations that typically happen with the trainer. And we find that that is especially helpful, especially if you're going to walk your new auditors into a pre-audit or a gap analysis. We also have Introduction to ISO 22716. It's a 1-day course that can be held either on-site or online. It could be a hybrid of both if you have employees around the country or around the world. And if you want to get a discount, 10%, simply write in cosmetic pen, and that will avail you to the 10% discount. Anyway, if you have any questions, I hope you ask. I do want to ask a really quick question, because one of the big things that just happened with SGS this year is that SGS is now accredited for certification. And so obviously we've always done a lot of certifications, but something new at a next level, if you will. And I wanted to ask you, John, getting accredited, what's the significance of that for the common quality assurance person on this call today? What does that mean to them?
Well, what that means is that we went out and we became accredited with ANAB, the North American Accreditation Board, and we are accredited to issue 22716 certificates versus an unaccredited certificate, which is what most of our competitors now issue like we used to in the past. What that does is countries like Turkey now requires an accredited 22716 certificate in order to ship cosmetics into Turkey. There are some other companies that are evaluating that as well, of converting over to an accredited standard for requirements for being submitted. But it also assures you that not only has SGS in the past followed the ISO standard for accreditation for 22716, now we are being audited by ANAB to make sure that we are following the ISO standard for accreditation and the 22716 standard. And our auditors are being monitored by ANAB as well to ensure that we are doing everything we're supposed to do, and we get audit reports and respond to them just like our clients do. A more robust system and a more quality assured system for us to issue 22716 certification standards.
Thank you, John. That's right. Also training from SGS, so we do have a full range of courses. If you go to our website, you can see courses on just about anything, any standards. But we do have an upcoming cosmetic virtual training course, and if you're interested, that will be for internal auditing training. It is public training, so some of your teammates could hop on the call and listen if they would like to. Learn to audit your cosmetic GMPs according to ISO 22716 and 19,011 guidance, right? So that's held June 13th and 14th, or July 18th and 19th, August 19th and 20th. You can attend whether you're in the US or Canada. So if you'd like to participate, you have any questions, I hope you ask us. Also, Larry is the sales rep for cosmetics. He wasn't able to attend today, but he'll certainly be at CosmoProf, as will I. And CosmoProf's July 23rd to 25th in Las Vegas. We'll have a booth. And Certainly, we'll have coffee. People love the coffee. They can stop by for some. Larry said he wants to make your personal cup of coffee, so remind him of that when you meet him in Cosmocroft. There will be a giveaway, a Yeti cooler that you can enter to win for that contest. And if you have any information, if you have any questions about that, I hope you contact us. If you'd like to subscribe for more, whether it's to learn more about on-demand webinars, recordings, live events, facility training sessions, etc., you can always subscribe at YouTube. There's a whole library of videos there that might be of assistance for you. And I definitely want to check in. We're really grateful you attended, but we want to ask you before you hop off here, are there any questions that you would like us to answer? If there are, please feel free to type them in now. We'd love to answer any questions you might have.
All right, so it looks like we have quite a few. So the first one we have is, we manufacture cosmetics for different retailers who need to report to the FDA. So I'm assuming it's who needs to report to the FDA. As a manufacturer, you have to register, but whoever's name is on the product label has to submit their registration to the FDA. And if you're referring to questions around recalls, then that's going to be a joint discussion between you and your customer or client around the recall information, because if it's not your product, it would be with you guys supporting and helping them. Hopefully that answers that question. If not, throw another question in the box. All right, the one above that. Has the required product safety substantiation data been defined, and what is expected to meet this requirement? As of now, there is no final definition that the FDA has submitted or put in a guidance document as far as safety substantiation requirements. They're expecting you to decide what safety is for your product, and then they will evaluate you and decide if you're right or not. What's expected there, from what we understand across the industry and talking to folks and listening to the FDA speak at different conferences, is that they're looking for either a literature review and documentation showing that your ingredients are safe, so when you mix your ingredients together that the product is safe, or in vitro or in vivo testing of your product to show that it's safe. All right, what's the next question, John? Which ISO number? So ISO 2716, in the 2007 version. All right. Distributors don't have formula information. How can they report their cosmetics? If you are strictly a contract distributor and you do not manufacture, you do not have to register as a manufacturer. And if you are just distributing for somebody else, then the company whose name's on the label has to submit the product registration. If you're referring to the distributor being the person who has their name on the label, then they have to have access to that information from their manufacturer in order to submit the information into the FDA. So it's going to be there's a lot of times where contract manufacturers make what's called a white label product, to where they own the formulation and then they make it with different people's product names and company names on the final product label. The contract manufacturers are going to have to work with the responsible people to get that information submitted to the FDA. All right. Do the GMP requirements apply for the package of the cosmetics? Yes, the GMP has any labeling on it, or it touches the product, then yes, GMP is. If the package is strictly a brown brown cardboard box or white cardboard box with no information on it, then no, that does not fall under the GMP. So if it has labeling or any type of identification on it, then yes, it falls under the GMPs. All right. Number 10 we don't answer. Okay, then we go to what sections of 22716 are applicable to distributors who label the product under their name but do not actually manufacture the cosmetic product. So you're going to have Section 3, personnel, Section 4, premises, Section 5, equipment, Section 6, your raw materials are going to be your products coming in. Section 7 is, go back to my list here so I get my clauses correctly. Hang on just a second. All right. So Clause 7 is production. That would be your relabeling operation. Finished product activities, 8 would apply. If you do any testing or not, would apply. OOSs would apply if you're doing any outside, if you're doing testing inside or outside. Your waste control, your subcontracting activities, deviations, recalls, change control, internal audit, and documentation. So basically, all of these major buckets are going to apply, but when you get down into the individual sub-clauses, you'll have some that do and do not apply to what you do. But you're only responsible to be compliant to the ones that are applicable to the organization, and then you claim the others as a non-applicability. All right. Okay, so what's the next one going up? Because I got to get my mouse back over. Move up. All right. Are we EU PIFs be acceptable as proof of safety also in the U.S.? Potentially. Don't know for sure yet, but potentially. Could be. We don't know exactly what the FDA is looking for. They haven't come out and actually said it yet. So I'll have to wait and see if anybody gets a 483 or a warning letter for using that as safety substantiation. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that one. All right. Number 18. Can you talk more about the GMP standards around raw materials and what companies need to do to confirm products actually meet the specs? So, in 22716, if you want to receive a material strictly off a C of A, you actually have to do a physical audit of the manufacturing site and the supply chain warehouses. If you don't want to do a physical audit of the site and you want to qualify your vendor some other way, or your manufacturer some other way, then you have to at least perform an ID test on the material coming in. In addition, you, as part of your vendor qualification, you have to do a periodic testing and confirmation of the certificate of analysis. So either you'll have to do testing in-house or send the testing out-of-house to confirm that the COA is correct. Depending on the amount of material you purchase. Depending on the amount of material you purchase, it may be a yearly activity, or it may be a more frequent activity. The less you purchase, the less frequency you have of reviewing the C of A. But if you're bringing in large quantities, you may have to, based upon risk, you may do it twice a year or once a quarter, depending on how much. Hopefully that helps with that question. What portion, if any, of the mandatory product information may be disclosed off-pack on company website under MoCRA? From what I understand, the labeling information that's required to be on the label has to be on the label. As far as additional product information, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. So if our email addresses are at the end of the presentation, if you could supply more information, I could provide you with a better answer. What is the mechanism for identifying and recording a responsible person? Okay, so the mechanism for identifying and recording a responsible person is the name of the company on the product label. Whose name's on the label? So if you make a product with an equate label, Walmart would be the owner, would be the responsible person. A L'Oreal product with a L'Oreal name would be L'Oreal would be the responsible person. So it's the person on the label. So, and then from there, that should help answer that question. Does a raw material manufacturer have to be ISO 22716 certified? The answer is no. A raw material manufacturer does not have to be ISO 22716 certified. In fact, ISO 22716 is not the appropriate certification for a raw material manufacturer. A certification called FC, which is EFFCI, the European Federation for Cosmetic Ingredients, is the globally accepted standard for cosmetic ingredient GMPs. It's actually a bolt-on annex to ISO 9001. And no, they're not required to be that. It's a good thing to be certified because it helps reduce the number of audits you may face and the additional questions, because your clients and customers can use that certification as part of their vendor qualification program. You do have the right as a manufacturer of cosmetics products to require your raw material suppliers to get FC certified. They may not like it, but you have the right to do that. All right, does MoCRA require cosmetic ingredients to be reviewed for safety or be approved by the FDA for topical use before use in a cosmetic product? No, they required them. Yeah, your raw materials should be part of your safety substantiation review. And if you don't have a prior FDA approval for topical use, then you may or may not decide that you may need some safety in vitro or in vivo testing to prove safety on your product. And Dave, I owe you one for that question. You know more than I do. What is co-manufacturing role in adverse event reporting? The adverse event should come through customer complaints to the company on the label. So the co-manufacturer's role, you would not be the one reporting it to the agency. You would be sharing that information with the responsible person. The responsible person would be the people that were reported to the agency. And you're going to have to help your partner company through the investigation process. All right. What type of commercial personal care products and their ingredients are not covered by MoCRA? Professional hair dyes are one that are not covered by MoCRA. Professional nail polishes are not covered by MoCRA because those are used in a professional environment. Other than that, off the top of my head, I don't know, and I would have to do more research, which I can do for you. So Dave Schoenecker, I'll send you a message on that. Does human testing lab need to be FDA certified? The FDA actually doesn't issue certifications to testing laboratories. Testing laboratory could choose to be ISO 17025 certified, or potentially there are other GLP or GCP certifications by other companies like SGS out there for those. But the laboratory should at least follow the FDA requirements for testing and be registered with the FDA for doing testing. Does MoCRA ISO 22716 apply to cosmetic ingredient manufacturing? At this point, MoCRA does not apply to cosmetic ingredients. 22716 does not apply to in cosmetic ingredients. MoCRA focused on cosmetic manufacturers, and just like pharmaceutical and medical device companies, the FDA is asking those companies to hold their suppliers accountable to meeting GMPs. So again, EPSI is the appropriate qualification, certification in GMPs for cosmetic ingredient manufacturing. So the company whose name is on the label is exempt due to sales. Does the cosmetic not require listing? Yes, I forgot to mention that. The FDA does have an exception for companies that over a 3-year period have less than $1 million in sales. They are not required to register with the FDA their products. And if a manufacturer of products has less than $1 million a year in sales on average over 3 years, they do not require to register with the FDA as a manufacturing site either. Which countries aside from the U.S. adhere to FDA requirements rather than ISO 22716? The other countries that apply to the FDA requirements are the countries like Guam, Puerto Rico that are under U.S. jurisdiction but not officially a state. But everybody else in the world adopted 22716.
John, I think that's going to take up our time today. If there are any questions that are remaining, we can email the response out. But
okay.
Again, go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
We appreciate everybody for attending. If you have any questions, you can always email John direct. His email is showing right now, as is Larry's too. Again, Larry and I will be at Cosmoprof should you happen to be there. We hope you stop by and say hello. On behalf of everybody at SGS, John, myself, I know Paris is attending. She's helped so many people today. The entire team, we're grateful for your business and we're grateful for the opportunity to help out in any way we can. Wishing you a great day. Thank you.